Computational Thinking, Tennyson here. In this video, we're going to discuss the idea of a named tuple. A named tuple is a way of organizing data around an idea that's kind of similar to a class, but it's a bit simpler and it applies to only a certain type of data really, and that's historical data or data that we know is not going to change in our program. So we learned about classes a couple weeks ago, and we know that classes are a way of representing ideas or things in the real world or things that we come up with in our head, and then associating attributes and methods with that object or that idea. Attributes are the data about it. The methods are the things that that object can do. So we made a dog example, and that dog had attributes like fur or color or breed, and then things it could do included like bark or run. And so a class can do things and it has data about it, whereas a named tuple is an unchangeable way of tying data to an idea, but it doesn't include any sort of functionality. It's similar in a way to a dictionary where we establish key-value relationships. I have some data in front of me here. In this case, it's a set of variables where I've got game title, game year, and game system. Another way of thinking about that might be a dictionary that goes something like this. Zelda is a dictionary, which includes a key of game title, where the value of game title is actually the Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time maybe, and then we would have game year would be 1988. We established that key value relationship, so on and so forth. When I run my code, I can see that I've got Zelda, and I say something like zelda.get game title, and it will give me Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But dictionaries, while they are useful in certain contexts, in a lot of contexts actually, they're not necessarily the most appropriate data type in Python for something like this. Because the thing that we've used to name our dictionary is this variable, and this variable doesn't necessarily tie directly to the game. It doesn't have like a sort of relationship that we might want to establish among all these different ideas about this particular game. And it's also something that can change. We can change the data in a dictionary if for some reason we don't want this data to be modified. A tuple is also a good, or a named tuple is also a good solution because it can't be changed. So let's look at this same set of data, but we're not going to use, we're actually going to get rid of the variables here, and we're going to look at an example using a named tuple. I'm just going to go ahead and comment this stuff out so you can see it, and you have a good comparison as we go through this. So the first thing I need to do is import named tuples from the collections library, and this is actually an internal library called collections. If you want to go and visit the collections library, you can. Collections Python 3, and then we'll go here. Here's all the documentation. There's a lot of handy tools inside the collections library. It's one of the most useful. It includes named tuples, default dictionaries, dex are handy, and then counter is one of the best sort of objects that we can use for getting counts of things in different data types. So with that said, we're going to focus on named tuples. And in order to make a named tuple that we're going to store some data in, or sort of create a blueprint for an object, first we give it a name. And just like classes, we're going to give it a name with a capital letter. I think before when I said, hey, classes are the only thing in Python with a capital letter at the beginning, I was kind of lying, because named tuples are like classes, and so because it's a class-like object, we give it a, it's a subclass technically, so we give it a capital letter at the beginning. Okay, so we say named tuple, we open our parentheses, and then we say, okay, what is the name or what is the type of this object? And we're going to say game. Typically, this guy right here mirrors the variable name in most cases. And then we want to know what sort of, or what fields of data, what attributes does this named tuple have? In this case, we're going to be interested in title, year, and the system that this game came out on. And so that's our named tuple blueprint. We'll be able to make as many named tuples as we want using this blueprint. Now we'll go ahead and run our code just to make sure, and if we type in game, we'll see that we've got this sort of class, this subclass of game in our main file. The next step is to take our data and turn that into an actual named tuple. So in this case, I'm going to say Zelda, and that's going to be game, and then I will give it a name of Zelda, and then a title, or actually, oops, I made a mistake. This is actually title. We're going to do it like this. So title is going to be Legend of Zelda. We'll just leave it like that. And then the year will be, notice I'm saying like year equals, title equals. Okay. Year equals 1998. And then system will be Nintendo. Actually, it's a Nintendo 64. Because this is one of the first games I got for a Nintendo 64. All right. Now if we run our code, we can say, all right, what's Zelda? That tells us it's a named tuple. Type Zelda. It's actually class game, but it is a named tuple we can see here because of this sort of format. That's syntax. But what's convenient is just like a class, I can actually go through and use dot notation to access these different attributes. And so that's really the key value of a named tuple is the organization, the readability, and then the way it works in the sense with dot notation. It's just very accessible and usable by a programmer. So this is why it's a little easier than a dictionary where we have to say things like, oh, Zelda dot get and then the key, or whatever it might be. Now, like I said, these are immutable. They can't be changed. So you don't really want to use them for data that will be changed. You never want to use a named tuple for data that you expect to change. For example, we can't reassign the year that Zelda came out. We can say 1999, but it's going to tell us, hey, that won't work. So if, for example, you instead made a named tuple like this, you said checking account is a named tuple, and then it has a type of checking account, right? And then we said something like balance was its field, right? And then we come over here and we make a checking account. So we'll say ACCT is a checking account, and that's going to have a balance of $400. Actually, let's make it more interesting. We'll make negative $25, right? And then someone finally gets paid and they want to, add some money to their balance, like to get them out of the red. You can't do that. So it doesn't make any sense to use a named tuple when we're dealing with data that will change. That's named tuples. And in the next video, I'll show you how we'll take this idea and put it into our beautiful soup code with the worst video games ever.